This is John chapter 3, probably one of the most famous passages in the Bible where Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and he tells Nicodemus, you need to be born again. That's a famous phrase, right? Used to describe evangelical Christians. We're going to talk about that phrase today in Greek and see what it means and look at the other times it's used in the book of John and see if it really means born again or if Jesus probably had a different sense for that word. So in this chapter, it starts out with Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus. Then we'll go to John the Baptist again, who we already saw, if you remember, in chapter 1. John the Baptist will have some teaching. It's not a real long chapter. It is longer than chapter 2, but still not very long. I'm going to do this similar to the chapter 2 video, where as I read the passage in Greek, I'll read 3 or 4 verses at a time, what's pictured on the screen. And in red boxes, I will outline the main verb in each sentence or clause. And then we'll go back through and the subject I'll put in blue. So if you're learning Greek, try to identify those yourself. That's kind of the backbone of the sentence, of the clause. If you can identify those two pieces, the main verb, usually indicative verbs, although sometimes it's going to be subjunctive verbs or the main verbs in a given clause. And then participles are also going to be very frequent. I'm not going to outline those in red because participles are a little bit different in their grammatical function. So once we've highlighted the main backbone of the sentence, I'll go back and translate through the whole thing. And I think this method will help you if you're a student of Greek, but it's your first time getting into actual Greek texts in big chunks. This is one method you can use to sort of slow yourself down, help avoid that feeling of overwhelm where you just feel immersed and you're drowning and you can't swim because everything seems so unfamiliar and there's so much information there. Just slow down, break the sentence down one step at a time. You probably know a lot of these verbs already, and you probably know a lot of these nouns already. And so that's what we're going to start with, just slowly outlining those. And then once we have the main sense of the passage through the verb and the noun, and the main noun, the subject, then you have some context to work with that will help you understand the rest of the sentence. So let's start in John chapter 3, verse 1. Ein de anthropos ekton phariseon, Nicodemus ōnoma avto, arkon ton Iudeon. Utos elphin pros avton, niktos ke ipen avto, Rabbi, idamen oti apotheu elelithus, didaskalos. Udis gar dinete tavta tasemia pien, asi piis, ean me, o theos met avtu, apokrithe Iesus ke ipen avto. Amen, amen, lego si. Ean me tis ānωθεν ānωθεν, ou dinete idin tain basilian to theu. Let's stop there. So I think I've at least gotten most of the main verbs here. Now let's go back and look for the nouns. So anthropos, this Omicron sigma ending tells you it's probably the subject, right? Even though there is no article in front of it. Onoma is name. That's a third declension noun. So it's a little bit odd in form, but that is the nominative case. Here we have a pronoun, which is the subject. This one. This is from God. This is a little bit of an odd sentence, but it looks like didaskalos is the subject. And then I think here it's another pronoun. Here it's you in this clause. Here we see the article with God, so that's the subject. The nominative article is always easy to identify because it's just that omicron. Here, Jesus' name in Greek is only partially declinable. This is the nominative form. Here, the subject of this clause is implied. So this is the lexical form of the verb to say, lego. So it's I say, even though I is not explicitly there. Here it's tis, and then this dinate is third person singular. And so there's an implied subject here, which is exactly the same. It's just pointing back to this previous clause and has the same subject. Okay, so this is the basic outline of the passage. We may notice a few more to box in as we go through the whole thing in detail, but let's just start with this. So there was a man out of the Pharisees. That's usually how I shorthand translate this preposition, which is ek, which you can think of like the English word exodus. It's someone coming out from where they are. Now, this is just this sort of phrase where it has ek, and then it has like a group following the ek. Usually says this is like this person that we're talking about is one of the members of this group. So Nicodemus is one of the Pharisees, and his name, onoma, is name. So Nicodemus is his name. You notice right here that the avto, you might expect, like in the way we say it in English, we would probably use genitive, but because I would say, my name is Joseph. And so I would use the possessive form, which would be genitive in Greek. What we actually do is use dative case in Greek. So think of that like someone's giving you your name when you're born, right? So you're like the recipient or the indirect object of the name. That's how it's thought of in Greek. That's why we use dative case. So this Nicodemus was a leader. We've talked a lot about this word or other forms of this word in previous videos. So as a leader of the Jews, this one came towards him at night and said to him. So we don't know here who's the him, or later on it will tell us it's Jesus. But if you go back to chapter 2, which is not on the screen, it's clear that Jesus is the subject. Also, he calls him rabbi. There are a lot of clues here of who Nicodemus is talking to. So we know that from God you have come a teacher. Now, teacher here is the subject of the sentence, and the implied subject from the verb is you, right? So this is a little bit of a strange construction to me. I don't know how common this kind of thing is, but it's clear what it means, right? It's the teacher is the subject and you are the subject, so you are the teacher. And he's just filling in Jesus' role here. So you have come from God and teacher has come from God. Usually with this subject, you would expect the third person, but here we have the second person verb. So direct you. Nicodemus is just saying, you are a teacher who's come from God. No one for, okay, so we have gar here is just saying for. So it's linking back to the previous statement. Gar is telling us, this is how we know. And this is how we know you're a teacher from God. No one is able the things, the signs, these signs to do, which you do, if not was God with him. If not, God is with him. So is how you would fill that in. Now, let me go back because I just noticed something. So this word might be a little bit unfamiliar. Elelethus. This is just the perfect form of to come. So erchome is a very common verb, right? This is just the perfect form of it, and it looks nothing like erchome. This is just a highly irregular verb. You don't even have to memorize it. If you just spend time reading the New Testament in Greek slowly and carefully in context, you will learn these forms automatically because they're so common. And the Gospel of John does use this perfect form of to come over and over again. Okay, so Nicodemus made this statement to Jesus. We know you're a teacher sent from God, and here's why, because these signs you're doing. What does Jesus answer to him? So, apokrithe Iesus keipen avto. This formula we see over and over again. I think we've already seen it in John chapter 1 and chapter 2. He answered and he said. It seems repetitive, right? Because we have both answered and said, but it's just something that shows up over and over again in the Greek, this sort of double verb. So he's not just saying, but his saying is specifically an answer or reply to what Nicodemus said. Amen, amen, legosi. This is another sort of formula that Jesus uses over and over again to emphasize what he's about to say. So, amen, amen, I tell you, or I think a lot of English translations will translate it truly, truly, I say to you. If not, someone is born ӓνωθεν. So ӓνωθεν is the word we're really going to dig into here. It's often translated born again, but it can also be from above. So born, єνεθε is born, has been born, passive form. And then ἀνωθεν is either again or from above. If he's not done this, he's not able to see the kingdom of God. So which is it? Is it from above or born again? Now, part of that we're going to figure out based on the context. What does Nicodemus respond back to Jesus? What does Jesus say to Nicodemus? That'll help us fill it in. But we can also look at what the rest of the Gospel of John says about this word. Let me wipe out these notes, and then I'm going to skip over to a passage list. Okay, so this is outlining instances of this word ӓνωθεν in the Gospel of John. So we've got 4 examples in the SBL Greek New Testament, which is the version I'm using. And let's go through those. So John 3:3 is the one we just went over. John 3:31, we will also get to this one today, but let's go ahead and look at it here. O ἀνωθεν erchomenos epano panton estin. O on ektes yes estin. Ke ektes yes lali. O ek tu uranu erchomenos epano panton estin. Just a side note here, if you're confused about how I pronounce this gamma, like why I say yes instead of gace, I went through that in one of the earlier videos. I think it was the John chapter 1 video. I went through how to pronounce gamma in Greek. If you're learning Erasmian pronunciation, then that's one of many things that you've been taught wrong, and it's going to make it hard to learn the language. So if you're interested in this series, go back to chapter 1 and one of the timestamps that explains how to pronounce gamma. It's probably the hardest consonant to get through in Greek, and I go through that in great detail, when to make it a hard G sound and when to make it a softer Y sound. So we have ἀνωθεν, and then we have erchomenos. So this is a participle, right? So the one coming again or from above. Those are our 2 candidates, right? For this word, it's again or it's from above. So let's try the one coming again above all is the one who out of the earth is, and out of the earth speaks. The one out of heaven coming above all is. So does again make sense here, or does from above make more sense here? The one from above coming above all is. And this epano is 2 pieces. It's like epi, which is on, right? So it's a preposition on. And then this on is similar to ana, which is another preposition meaning up or above. So the sense is above everything. You've got 2 prepositions that kind of show the sense of above or on. So based on the context, right, he's saying this one who's either coming from above or coming again is above everything, and it's contrasted. That one is contrasted with the one from the earth. So it's pretty clear on this passage, 3:31, that ἀνωθεν means from above, not again. Now, John 19:11, Apokrithe avto Jesus, uk ikis exousian katemu udemian ime ein dedomenon si ἀνωθεν. Dia tuto o peridus me si misona amartian eki. So the context here is he's speaking to Pilate, and the Jewish leaders have just delivered Jesus over to Pilate because they want Pilate to put him to death, right? So Jesus answered him, meaning Pilate, not you have authority over me, if not at all was given to you again. So this is the word again. This is the word in question that we're trying to understand. That authority was given to you again, or that authority was given to you from above. And then for this reason, through this, the one delivering me to you, greater sin has. So this is always translated from above, right? Jesus is telling Pilate, you wouldn't have any authority to me unless it was given to you again. That just doesn't make sense. It's from above here. So let's look at the last example. Iun stratiote ota estavrosen ton Iesun elabon ta imatia aptu ke epiesen tesara meri. Ekasto stratiote meros ke ton kitona. Ende o kiton araphos ek ton ӓνωθεν e phantos di olu. This is when you notice it's John 19 again, so very close to when Jesus is delivered over to Pilate. Now he's actually being crucified, and so stratiote is the soldiers, so it's the soldiers plural, and they're the ones who crucifying Jesus. They took his clothes and made 4 parts, each soldier apart. Okay, so 2 each soldier apart, but the ketone was all in one piece, remember? So it was woven from the top, this is from above, through the whole thing. So it was one piece woven from above, from the top of the ketone, which is, I think, the tunic. It's woven in one piece. There's no seam in it from top to bottom, or from top to through the whole thing, is literally the meaning of the Greek. So here again, it's not woven again through the whole thing. These are 4 examples, the only 4 times this word is used in the Gospel of John, and every time it means from above. So this is one piece of evidence that this word does not mean again, or that's not the intent with which it's used. But one other line of, I guess, logic or evidence we can use is the context. So we're coming back to verse 3. Where's the word? Let's highlight it again. I'll use this green so it stands out. Okay, so born again or born from above. We finished verse 3. Now let's go on to verse 4. Lei pros avton o Nicodemus, pos dinete anthropos genethene geron on, me dinete is ten kilian tes metros, avtu deuteron iseltin ke genethene. Apokrithe Jesus, amen amen legosi. Ean me tis genethene, genethe ex idatos ke pneumatos, udinete is elthin is ten basilian to the. This one is actually infinitive. I didn't mean to box it in. So verse 4, let's see what we have in terms of nominative. So Nicodemus is the subject here. Nicodemus is the one speaking towards him, meaning Jesus. How is able a man, and here we have infinitive. So this is a verb form, but it's a infinitive. How can a man to be born old being? When he's old, not able, into the hollow. This is like womb or hollow place or belly right here. Actually, I should do that. I'll do it in blue. So we keep verb forms in red and noun forms in blue. So the womb of his mother, a second time right here, deuteron, enter in, and to be born. So the way Nicodemus interprets this is that Jesus is saying, you must be born again, right? This is the emphasis of Nicodemus' reply. If Nicodemus had took Jesus to mean born from above, he might have realized that this was a symbolic or metaphorical thing. But he takes Jesus to mean born again. So just like a literal meaning, you were born once and now you're old Nicodemus. It doesn't explicitly say he's old, but he's one of the rulers of the Jewish council. We know he's pretty old based on that. It's like, how can I be born again? Probably his mom is not even still living. So how can he enter again into his mom's womb and be born? That's the sense Nicodemus is taking it. And then in verse 5, we see Jesus' response. So I tell you, if not anyone is born out of water and spirit, not able to enter into the kingdom of God. So notice some of the parallels here. In Jesus' response, he uses this word 鴉ωθεν, right? So right here, except he's talking about, or sorry, I've just pointed to where Nicodemus uses it. But Jesus also uses it too, right here. Nicodemus is talking about entering in again to his mother's womb. Jesus is talking about entering into heaven. So Nicodemus is stuck in this literal framework, whereas Jesus is saying, not that what Jesus is saying is not literal, it's just a different meaning. It's born from above, not born again. So enter into the womb, enter into the kingdom of God. And then the other part of Jesus' response is this bit about born out of water and spirit. So the spirit piece is really the part that Jesus is going to run with as he continues explaining this concept to Nicodemus. We're going to see the idea that the spirit is from above, and being baptized in water and spirit is the baptism from above. Although maybe the water is talking about the natural birth. That's possible. But it could be referring to baptism. I'm definitely coming down on this born again question, that was not the main sense of Jesus' statement. That's the main way Nicodemus took it, and that's the main way it's translated today, but it's not the primary sense that was intended. And that has two pieces of evidence. We saw other uses in the book of John where it's translated from above, and we saw the context here where Jesus' emphasis on the use of ӓνωθεν in verse 3, based on the context, his emphasis is on born from above. And I think we'll continue to see that as we go on to verse 6. But it's interesting that the way it's translated today and the way we still usually read this in English is the misunderstanding that Nicodemus had. That's the emphasis. Now, is it totally wrong? No, because if a person is born from above, that happens after their natural birth. And so it is a sense of born again, because it's the second time they're born from above. So it's born again in addition to born from above. So both of those meanings are true. It's just the one that Jesus is clearly emphasizing is the born from above part, not the born again part. And yet we run with the born again Christian language today. So let's go on to verse 6. This is the part of the video that I'm taking the most time with. We'll definitely speed up as this continues through chapter 3. To yeyenemenon ek te sarkos sarx estin. Ke to yeyenemenon ek tu pneumatos pneuma estin. Me thabmases oti ipon si di imas yenethene ӓνωθεν. To pneuma opu thelipni ke ten phonein avtu akuis al uk idas pothen erkete ke pu ipai. Utos estin pas o yeyenemenos ek tu pneumatos. Apokrithe Nicodemus ke ipen avto. Pos dinate tavta yeneste. Okay, let me just make sure there's so many verbs. There's a lot more verbs than normal in this discussion between Nicodemus and Jesus, so it's a little hard for me to get them all while I'm reading the text. Maybe that's most of it. So let's go back now and find the nouns. So the one having been born out of the flesh is. So this is the subject. And then this is also, we have the imi or the to be verb used equating the two sides. The one born out of the flesh is one side. The other side is flesh, and it's equating the two. So if you're born out of the flesh, you are flesh. Contrasting the one born out of the Spirit, Spirit is. So do not marvel that I say to you, so it is necessary to you be born again or from above. I think it's still from above. So the Spirit is the subject. The Spirit, where he wants, he goes, or where it wants, it blows. Now, Spirit here, this word pni is like the wind blowing, because the word for Spirit is the same word as the word for wind. So earlier, what Jesus was saying, born out of water, could have been born out of water and wind, or it could be born out of water and Spirit. And now it seems like he's going with more of the wind meaning. The wind, where it wants, it blows. And the sound of it, its sound, you hear. So implied verb here is you, but not, okay, I missed a verb right here, but you do not know from where it comes and where it goes. So you don't know the origin or the destination of this wind, you just hear its sound and you know it's there. So then we have the one born out of the Spirit. So in this way, this utos is like in this same way, in this same manner, is everyone who's been born out of the wind or out of the Spirit. So this is where we usually say he's talking about born out of the Spirit, which is a birth from above, which coincidentally happens to be the second birth. Then Nicodemus answers and says to him, Nicodemus is the subject, how is able this to happen or to become? So to happen, how is this able to happen? And just a side note here before we move on to verse 10, you notice John's tendency to repeat the same kind of language over and over again, the same words. He's picking dialogues, and they uses a lot of repetitive vocabulary and phrasing. Jesus doesn't always speak that way, right? Sometimes he speaks in parables and narratives and stories, but John seems to gravitate to those discourses of Jesus or those dialogues where Jesus is using the same repeated phrases over and over again and changing the meaning and adding on and developing to it piece by piece. And that's the way that John himself likes to write. And that's what he emphasizes in the book of First John, if you've seen my video on that. And that's the way he talks in a lot of his narrative sections, which we'll get to a couple of his narrative, or not narrative, a couple of his sections that are, him as the narrator giving his commentary. That's the way he likes to talk. Okay, let's move on to verse 10. Apokrithe Iesus ke ipen avto. Si o didaskalos to Israel ke tavta u Ginoskis. Let me get this verb here. Amen, amen, lego si, oti o idamen, la lumen, ke o eurakamen martyrumen, ke ten martyrian emon u lambaneta, ita epia av ipon imin, ke u pisteveta, pos ean ipo imin, ta epurania pistevseta, ke udis anebebeken, is ton uranon ime o ektu uranu katabas, o ios tu anthropu. Okay, so a lot of verbs here. These stood out to me. If you know a decent amount of vocab, you will say, hey, this is a verb form, right? And there was another one here, idamen. These are indicative too. I was just a little confused as I read it. I almost thought those were participles, I guess, because they had the article in front of them, idamen and eora common. And because there were so many verbs packed in there, I was like, how can there be this many indicative verbs? So I didn't box them in, but I think that it actually is. There's just a ton of indicative verbs that John is piling up here, or Jesus piling up as he's speaking. Okay, so Jesus is the one who answers and says to him, you are. Now we have the equation, right? I think they call in grammars like the equative, I forget what they call it, the equative sense of imi, it used to equate both sides. So you are the teacher, and then so you and the teacher are both in nominative case. You're the teacher of Israel, and this, not you know. So you is the implied subject here. And then this is a question. The Greek question mark is the semicolon. And it's not obvious to me that that has to be a question. There's no explicit question word in this sentence. So maybe it could just be a statement by Jesus, but the editors of the SBL, Greek New Testament, are saying that they believe it's a question. Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you that what we know, we speak, and what we have seen, we testify." So the men, notice all the men's here means it's first person plural, right? So we is the implied subject. So I'm just going to put this empty blue box. We is the implied subject for all four of these verbs. And the testimony, our, not you receive. So notice here, this te is you plural, and that's the implied subject here is you plural. So interesting shift in the grammar where Jesus starts speaking in first person plural and second person plural. So he's talking about not just Nicodemus specifically, like up here, this is just you singular, right? This C. He's not just talking about Nicodemus specifically, but a bigger group of people. Maybe he's referring to the Pharisees. Maybe he's referring to the Jews in general. And then this verse 12 is also going to give us more evidence that the ӓνωθεν is from above. So if the things on the earth I say to you, and you do not believe, you plural here again with the tau epsilon, how, if ever, I say, so I is implied subject, to you, the things of heaven, ta epurania, will you believe? Notice the sigma here is giving us a hint this is future, so it's will believe. And then once again, you plural. If I tell you things about the earth or sort of earthly things, and you don't believe that, or you don't trust my word, or you don't understand what I'm saying, how will you believe or how will you trust in my word if I tell you about heavenly things? Because you can't even grasp the earthly things. So again, that contrast between heaven and earth, between what's below and what's from above, is the emphasis of Jesus' teaching here. And no one steps up or goes up into heaven, if not, meaning that's literally, this is if and this is not. But these two words together can mean unless, and logically it makes sense, right? If not, it means the same as unless in English as well. So no one steps up into heaven, if not the one ek tu uranu. Remember, this exact same form was used earlier for Nicodemus, was ek phariseu. I don't remember the exact ending, but it's out of this place. So out of the Pharisees, Nicodemus came, and Jesus is implying he's coming out of heaven. So if not the one who stepped down, katabas is stepped down, and that's contrasted with ana bebaken. So ana is up, kata is down, and this is a compound verb. And then the bas part and the bebaken part are the same root verb, but this is the perfect. So it's like no one has stepped up, if not the one who stepped down. And so this is the participle form. Yeah, so perfect. And then this is the participle. So usually I haven't been boxing in participles. It's hard for me to remember because this is another verb here that changes a lot depending on which tense it's in or which mood. It's just the form changes a lot, so it's hard to remember. Okay, so the Son of Man is the one who stepped down. Let's move on. Next part is verse 14. Ke kathos Moises ipsosen ton ophin in te eremo, utos ipsothene di ton ion tu anthropou, ina pas o pistavon in evto, eke zoein aionion. Utos gar agapesin o theos, ton cosmon, oste ton ion ton moniene edoken. Ina pas o pistavon isepton, me apolete ala eke zoein aionion. Ugar apostilen o theos, ton ion is ton cosmon, ina krine ton cosmon, ina sote o cosmos diavtu. Okay, so we have a lot happening on this page. You notice there's a division here. They have a paragraph break in the SBL Greek New Testament. And this is where a lot of people today believe Jesus's direct quote ends at the end of verse 15. And then John, the narrator, gives his commentary starting in verse 16. Now, I looked into this briefly, and it sounds like most ancient writers thought that this whole section, going all the way to verse 21, I think, was Jesus speaking, still speaking to Nicodemus. But more modern commentators believe that starting in verse 16 to 21 is John's commentary. The natural way I would read this is that it is John's commentary, like just reading that in context of what John has written elsewhere in First John and in the rest of the Gospel of John. It seems like he has this tendency, whether it's John the Baptist or Jesus, he has this tendency to just abruptly switch from that person speaking, the narrative section, to a commentary section without any warning. It seems like he does that pretty often. And the kind of language he uses in these commentary sections seems to follow certain patterns and to be a similar vocab and way of speaking that he has used like in First John. So I tend to think that starting in verse 16 is his commentary. Let's first go through this first part starting in verse 14. And just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, in this way should be lifted up the Son of Man. And notice this D verb, it is necessary. It's a very odd verb, but you see it so many times that it's not hard to identify. There's really no subject. It's just a statement about the world. It is necessary. And then it gives you the statement. So it's necessary that the Son of Man be lifted up. And what's the purpose? So remember, Ina is telling us the purpose. What's the purpose of the lifting up? It's so that all the ones believing in him might have life eternal. So O pistavon here functions as the subject of this ina clause. And then what are they doing? What is the subject doing? Well, the subjunctive verb have or might have life eternal. And then we have John 3:16, maybe the most famous verse in the whole Bible. In this way, God loved, and then the subject here is God. What did God love? So what's the direct object? It's ton cosmon, the world, so that the Son, the only born, he gave. So the implied subject here is looking back to God. And what's the purpose of giving this Son? So that all the ones believing into him not be destroyed or not perish, but have life eternal. So the subject of this ina clause is the same as the previous one, o pistavon. And just to pause here again and notice this idea of life eternal that Jesus is talking about, which comes from the born from above, it just reinforces the Son is being sent down from God to the earth, and the Son is being lifted up. So once again, we have all these contrasts between like above and below embedded in John's language. And so ӓνωθεν here, it just seems abundantly clear that Jesus's emphasis and John the narrator's emphasis is on born from above, not necessarily born again. And then verse 17, God is the subject, for God did not send the Son into the world. And the purpose, what is not the purpose? Because remember, we had negating. So the purpose, he did not send into the world to krine ton cosmon, in order to judge the world, but in order to save the world through him. Notice the two ena clauses, and they're contrasted using the all. And usually this would have another alpha, right? We've just dropped the alpha because the next word starts with a vowel. So the first ena clause tells us what's not the purpose. The second clause tells us what is the purpose of sending the Son into the world. The next page is verse 18. Okay, I took a little break to eat lunch, and now I'm back ready to finish this passage. We're about halfway through chapter 3 in terms of verse count. But I think in terms of content, the pieces that we need to spend the most time on are already behind us in the first half of the chapter. So I think the second half is going to go quite a bit faster. Let's start again in John 3, verse 18. O pistavon isavton u krineta, o de me pistavon e de kekrita, o de me pepistevken isto onoma tu monoyenus iu tu theu. Afte de estin e krisis, oti tophos elelithen is ton cosmon, ke agapesan I anthropi malon to skotos e tophos, engar afton ponera ta erga. Pasgar o favla prason misi tophos, ke uk ergete prostophos, ina me elekthe ta erga avtu. Okay, I forgot to box in the verbs as I went through, but let's just do that as we translate it. So the one believing into him, and remember this is the Son of Man, the one that the Father sent, based on the previous verses, is not judged. Ukrineta. So passive form of judged means the one believing is not the one doing or not doing the judging. He's the one being or not being judged, because this is the passive form. Ode me pistavon ede kekrita. If the one not believing already has been judged. Notice the similarity here, krineta with kekrineta. The main difference is obvious, right? I'll go ahead and box this in. But the main difference is these first two letters. So we have the reduplication, take the first consonant and then copy it, and then put an epsilon in there to form the perfect tense. So this is perfect tense, remember, is something that happened in the past that has ongoing consequences in the present. It's both past and present in a sense. So has been judged already. That not believed, so that's the main verb, into the name of the only born Son of God. And then we have this. So what is the this referring to? Notice that it's feminine, and this is feminine here as well. Krisis is related to, and I think, yeah, just to complete that thought, this is the judgment, that, and then he's going to tell us the judgment. So this krisis is related to both of these two words. Notice the kappa rho iota, kappa rho iota, kappa rho iota. In this case, the noun form, we have a sigma instead of the tau. But that's not uncommon, that you'll have sort of a root, the primary root of a word group having somewhere around 3 letters, and those 3 letters, then you build on a lot of other, you place a lot of other letters around them in order to form the noun and form different verbs. So here it was judgment, and like judging verb, and then here is like the judgment noun form. Notice also, if you say this word in English, crisis. Crisis is a kind of judgment. So you can see the etymological link there in our modern English word coming from the Greek. Now, it doesn't mean exactly the same thing, but it's very close. It's in the same realm of judgment. Okay, so what is the judgment? That the light has come. So we saw this word earlier, right? Very irregular form, perfect form of erchomē, to come into the world, and loved the people, or loved mankind more, the light, than, or more, they loved more the darkness than the light. Now, why was that? For what were their evil, the works. Their works were evil, so they loved darkness more than light. Now notice the language here, how similar it is to the letter of 1 John, both in verse 19 and as we continue. For everyone, wickedness or evil, prason is like doing or practicing, hates the light, and not comes towards the light. Why? So Ina clause telling us why they don't come towards the light, because not to show or to reveal or to be seen the works theirs. Okay, because their works are evil, they don't want their works to be seen, so they stay in the darkness, and they love the darkness more than the light. Verse 21. Okay, so you notice there's a paragraph break here. So what we're going to see is that verse 21 is the end of John's commentary on Jesus and Nicodemus' conversation. And then we're going to move to a new scene in the narrative. O de pion tein alethien erkete pros tophos. Ina phanerothe aptu ta erga oti inte o estin irgas mena. Meta tavta elthen o Iesus ke I methete aptu istain Iudean yen. Ke eki diatriben met afton ke baptizen. Ein de ke o Ioannes baptizon in enon in iis tu salim. Oti idata pola ein eki. Ke pere yinonto ke baptizonto. So finishing up verse 21, this is pretty obvious, a lot of the same vocabulary as what we just read. So the one doing truth comes toward the light. Why? So purpose clause, why is he coming towards the light? So that it will be revealed, and notice the ending the. This is subjunctive with the lengthened omega instead of omicron, and then the subscript iota, and it's in an ina clause. All those things tell you it's going to be subjunctive, and it's passive. So the theta, eta, I boxed that in because that shows it's passive. So will be revealed his works that in God has been working. So to show, so he's coming to the light so that it will be seen that his works are coming through God or have been done in God. So the one doing the truth is not afraid of the light. In fact, he actually wants to come into the light so that his works and the fact that they've come from God has been revealed. So this is similar to what Jesus says about the city on the hill. Let your light shine before men like a city on a hill, like a lamp on a stand, so that they will see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. And this, verse 21, is contrasted with the one who walks in darkness and therefore wants to conceal their works. Okay, now we move to the next part of the story. So after this came Jesus and the disciples his into the something of Judea. So Judea, actually, let me do that in blue since that's what I usually use for nouns. The land of Judah. We would often say earth. So earlier in the passage, we took this noun and we used the translation earth, but we wouldn't, in English, we wouldn't say into the earth of Judah. We would say into the land of Judah. So it's like saying the region, right? And there they remained a while with him and baptized. So with, actually, avton is them, plural. So what exactly is this saying? After this came Jesus and the disciples his into the land of Judah, and there remained with them and baptized. So I don't know if that's saying, this is a little confusing to me. Is that saying the Jesus is remaining with his disciples and baptizing, or that the disciples are baptizing? So this is singular verb. This is plural, or sorry, they're both singular with the N ending. So I assume that's saying Jesus, and there Jesus with them remained with them and baptized. So I think it's saying Jesus baptized and he remained with his disciples. They were all there together. Now, elsewhere in one of the Gospels, it says Jesus was not baptizing, but his disciples were baptizing. So might be interesting to compare this verse with that one. Maybe it's a different event as well. Anyway, let's go on to 23. So de gives us a development. So was also John baptizing at this place, Anon in Yis to Salim. So that's all a place. This is probably a smaller town or region near a bigger one that people would have known better. That's why they say near. Internationally, I tell somebody, I don't tell them my town because it's so small, but I say I'm from near Chicago, even though it's still quite a drive. And then OT. So the OT clause sometimes can mean like that, and it's just adding on a fact. Sometimes it means because. So here it seems pretty clear because it's linking the water and the baptizing. John is baptizing here at this place because there was much water there. And then here's another verb. Water much was there. And that's why John was baptizing there. And okay, so these are plural participles. They came to be there. This is yinome, but with a compound form with a preposition on the front, para. So they happened to be there, they became there, and baptizing. Maybe this is saying Jesus and his disciples are going nearby where John is, and these participles are referring back. It's plural, so presumably it's referring back to Jesus and his disciples. Whereas the first part of this verse is singular, and it's talking about John the Baptist, where he was, and he was baptizing. You can see the two different forms. So this is also a participle, baptizon, but it's first person. Tells you John is the one baptizing. And this is plural. Just notice the different ending on it. So yeah, that's how I would interpret this without looking into it more. It's just saying probably that Jesus and his disciples are coming nearby John the Baptist, and everybody's baptizing there near one another. Let's go to verse 24. Upogar ein beblemenos eistain philakein o Ioannes. Eieneto un zetesis ek ton metheton Ioannu meta Iudeu peri katharismu. Ke elphon pros ton Ioannen ke ipen avto. Rabbi, os ein meta su parentu Iordanu, o si me martirecas ide utos baptizi ke pantes erconte pros avton. Apocrythe. Well, let's stop there. So just do what's on the screen. So verse 24 is just telling us that John was not yet put into prison. So whoever the readers are, they know the story already, that John gets put into prison and is later beheaded by Herod. The standard understanding is that the Gospel of John was the last one written after the three synoptic Gospels. So probably John's readers are already familiar with the story. We saw that earlier with Peter too, right? Talking about Simon Peter, but then afterwards, Jesus actually told Peter that he would be called Cephas, which means Peter or rock. So there's a lot of aspects here where John assumes some prior knowledge on the part of his readers. Okay, so there happened, therefore, an argument. Notice the similarity between this form here, zetesis, and like zelos. Remember in John chapter 2, it said, zeal for your house will consume me, and zelos being zeal. And here we have a similar root, but a different noun. And so you can tell this has some relation to zeal, and it's going to be a dispute. So imagine two groups of people, both of whom are very passionate and zealous about their own idea, and they're arguing with one another. Out of the disciples of John met, so with a Jew about purification. This is like katharismu is like catharsis, a cleansing or purification. So one of John's disciples with a Jew about purification. I guess we don't know. This may not be just one of John's disciples, but it could be some of them. I don't think it really gives us the number here because the main verb, ieneto, is just saying there happened. So it's not really referring to a subject within the narrative, one of the characters within the narrative. Let's read on. And he came towards John and said to him, Rabbi, who was with you across the Jordan, who you testified about, look, this one baptizes, and all go towards him. So it seems like one of John's disciples is upset that Jesus is baptizing and lots of people are going to Jesus instead of following John. Remember in the early days, John had lots of crowds coming to him out of Jerusalem, but now those crowds are moving towards Jesus. And this disciple of John is upset about this, and he thinks John will be upset as well, possibly. Someone else is surpassing him. Now, what is the connection with this dispute about purification? So the word baptizing and the word purification are related, not in root forms or morphology or anything like that, but just the basic meaning of them is related. Baptizing, immersing in water, is a sign of like purification and repentance, right? Which the same thing for katharismu. And so that might link the dispute to what Jesus is doing. So possibly this Jew is going to go off to Jesus. I think we really just don't have enough information, but I'm just going to make up sort of a story here. Maybe this Jew is disputing something about the baptisms, and he decides to go off and follow Jesus. And then John's disciple is upset about all this. And so he brings up the fact that there's a competitor, a baptizing competitor to John. It's not exactly clear what are we supposed to take from this. Okay, let's continue on and we'll see John's response, which if you read the first part of the book, you know basically what John is going to say. Oops, I didn't delete my notes. Okay. Apokrithe Ioannes ke ipen. U dinate anthropos lambanin ude in ean me e dedominon avto ek tu uranu. Avti mis mi martirita oti ipon. Uk imi ego o Christos. Al oti apostomenos imi improsthen ekino. O ekon ten nymphein nymphios estin. O de philos tu nymphiou o estekos ke akuon avtu kara keri diatein phonein tu nymphiou. Avte un e kara e eme peplerota. So John responds and says, not able a man to take or receive, not one, if not that has been given to him out of heaven. You yourselves, okay. So this gives us a little more information about what is going on. So it's not just one of John's disciples who's come up to talk to him. There's more than one. And we get that detail here in verse 28, because this is plural. So you yourselves, me, you testified that I'm a little confused here. So this is you plural, and then this is testify that I said. Oh, okay. So there's an implied subject here, which is John. It's I said. And then the subject, this verb links back to this subject. So these of his disciples, you heard, or you can testify about me that I said. So you were there when I said the following: not I am the Christ, but have been sent I am before that one. Okay, so he's telling them you should not be upset that they're going towards the Christ by implication, because I myself said I'm not the Christ and I've been sent before him, and my purpose is to prepare his way, basically. He doesn't say that part here, but we know that from elsewhere. So the one having the bridegroom is. So notice these two, they have the same front part, but the ending is different. And so this is a feminine ending with the eta. This is a masculine ending with the omicron sigma. So bride, the one having the bride, groom is. And notice the os tells us this masculine form is the subject of the sentence, goes with estin, and links it to the o ekon. So the one having the bride, groom is. The one who loves the groom, the one who stands and hearing him, joy he rejoices. In joy he rejoices through or because of the voice of the groom. Okay, this, therefore, the joy. Okay, this refers to the joy. So this joy, therefore, mine has been fulfilled. So remember, plero. I'll use red because this is a verb. So the root here, play, means like plethora, plentiful. Imagine a cup that's filling up and running over. That's just like the fullness of this word. And we have the reduplication with the initial consonant being copied and pasted in front and then joined to the rest of the word with an epsilon. So this is perfect. So it has been made full and by implication remains full now. So this is a response we would expect from John because he's come to prepare the way for the Christ. He's not worried about competition with the Christ. He's happy that the Christ, who is the bridegroom, is fulfilling his role, right? And he sees himself as the friend of the groom who's happy to be there and share in the groom's joy. But this friend knows he's not the center of the wedding. Okay, verse 30. We're getting close to the end. Ekinon di avxanin emede elatuste. O ӓνωθεν erkomenos epano panton estin. O on ektasies estin. Ke ektasies lali. O ektu uranu erkomenos epano panton estin. O eoraken ke ekusen tuto martiri. Ke ten martirian avtu udis lambani. O labon avtu ten martirian esfragisen oti otheos aletes estin. All right, I'll go through this part pretty quick. So that one, it is necessary to grow or increase, and me to decrease. Remember we saw a word elasi or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was lambda, alpha, sigma, sigma. This is a related form to decrease. It meant like lesser. It sounded a lot like lesser in English. This is a related root, but for some reason, the basic root either has the lambda alpha sigma or the lambda alpha tau. And in one of them, there's been some kind of morphological change. I think it's the sigma is the changed version. So the basic root is lambda alpha tau, and I think there are a lot of words formed with that root that have to do with decreasing or lesser. But in the one example, the morphological changes have changed it to a sigma, and that's something that happens frequently in Greek. And pretty often, if you see a double letter like that, a double consonant, you know there's been some kind of morphological change happening. Okay, so verse 30 finishes up John the Baptist's little response to his disciples, and now we get John the gospel writer's commentary on this event. And he's going to use really similar language as what he's used before. It's going to be kind of repetitive, stressing the same elements as before. So the one from above, the one coming from above all is. The one out of the earth is, and out of the earth speaks. The one out of heaven coming above all is. We see and we hear, or we have seen and we hear this, he testifies. Okay, the one who has seen and heard this, he testifies, and his testimony no one takes or receives. So is John here talking about himself, the writer of the gospel, or is he talking about John the Baptist and commenting on John the Baptist? That could be the case because in this example, John the Baptist's disciple has not really understood what John the Baptist himself is saying, right? And teaching that basically, hey, you don't even need to stay here with me. You should go follow Jesus too, because I'm pointing to him. So that could be what the commentary here is, or maybe this is even John the Baptist still speaking, but I don't think so. The one taking his testimony has sealed or like approved. Esfragisen is like stamped or sealed, has put his seal that God is true. Okay, good. So this gets us to the end of the chapter. On gar apostilen o theos ta remata tu theu lali. Ugar ek metru didosin to pneuma. O pater agapa ton ion. Ke panta de doken in te kiri avtu. O pistevon is ton ion ekizoen eonion. O de apithon to io uk opsate zoen. All right, so this sounds a lot like John's normal language. So for who God sent, the words of God speaks, for not out of measure gives the Spirit. So if it's not out of measure, that means it's without measure. So God gives the Spirit without measure, and it seems like the implication here is that the giving of the Spirit is tied to the words, remata, which he speaks. So God gives the Spirit, and then from the Spirit, in connection with the Spirit, come the words of God, which he speaks. And it's also referring back here to the one sent by God. Is that John the Baptist? Is that Jesus? Could be either one. I mean, it definitely fits either one. The Father loves the Son, and all gives in the hand his. So he's giving everything, the all, into the hands of the Son. The one believing into the Son has life eternal. The one disobeying, apithon, the Son, not will see life, but the wrath of God remains on him. Okay, I'm not sure I have a lot more to say here, and I guess as the video went on, maybe I got tired because I stopped boxing in all those verbs, but hopefully you were able to start doing that yourself, putting together the backbone of the passage, the main verbs, the subject, and then filling in the gaps like we were doing. Just to review, there's quite a bit here in this passage, even though it's a short one. We have that conversation with Jesus and Nicodemus where we had the idea of is it born again or born from above? And I argued that Jesus was really intending to say born from above as the primary meaning. That does not exclude the born again meaning, but it's just not primary. And then we had this little bit about John the Baptist and the confusion even of John the Baptist's own disciples about what his mission was and what his purpose was, and that kind of basic jealousy that they had that John's ministry was being eclipsed by Jesus. Now, of course, there's a lot of lessons in there for us today. I'm not going to talk much about that today. I wanted to keep this mostly about the Greek and the grammar and bring out features of the Greek that you don't necessarily see in English. The next one is chapter 4, where Jesus is going to meet the woman at the well. That's also a really interesting chapter. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in John chapter 4.